Please welcome Larry Elder. Okay. Yep. My goodness, Karen, thank you. Who organized this? Give it up for Karen, she organized this whole thing. If I had known there'd be so many people, I would have prepared something to say. Thank you so much for having me. My goodness. We've got so many problems in this state. This man that I'm going to defeat on September 14th, he shut down the state in the most severe way than any of the other 49 governors have. While sitting up there at that French Laundry restaurant, with the very people that drafted the mandates that they were violating. They were not wearing masks. They were not engaging in social distancing while telling us to do so. His own kid, I love that t-shirt, sir. His own kids enjoying in-person private education. He shut down our businesses, kept his winery open. You know, a third of all small businesses in California are now gone forever. One of the many things I've done in my life is I ran a small business. By small business, I mean tiny. It had a dozen employees at its peak. I know how difficult it is to run a business. Many of them never fail, never succeed. Those who do succeed often run on very thin profit margins, often from payroll to payroll. A third of all small businesses in California are now gone forever because he ignored science and slammed the state down. It's outrageous. Hopes and dreams of all these people dashed because of this. The cost of living in California. The average price of a home has just now hit $800,000. That's 150% more than the national average. And one of the guests I frequently have on my radio show is an econ professor, brilliant guy named Leo Hanian. He says the average price of a home in California, because of the environmental rules and regulations foisted down the throats of developers by these extremists, the average price of a home in California is 50% more than it otherwise would be if it weren't for these environmental regulations. Outrageous. For the first time in our state's history, and we're about 170 years old, for the first time in our state's history, there's a net migration out of the state. And they're not the millionaires and billionaires that Bernie Sanders talks about. They're people making between 50 and 100K who cannot get that first house. That's the number one reason they cite for leaving. They cannot get a home. There's a magazine called CEO Magazine. It's been around for 17 years. And for 17 years, they've asked CEOs, what's the best state in which to do business, what's the worst? Based upon taxes, based upon spending, based upon the power of the public sector unions, based upon unfunded pension liabilities, based upon whether or not the business atmosphere is friendly or unfriendly. For 17 consecutive years, guess who's been last? We have. 17 consecutive years. It's outrageous. The homelessness problem we have. I'm born and raised here. And I was born here when the country was not nearly as affluent as it is right now, and now we have a homeless problem? Are you kidding me? Now, some people who are homeless are schizophrenic. These are people who are of danger to themselves and to others, and they need to be removed from the streets for their own protection, for the protection of the rest of the homeless population. One mentally ill homeless man just attacked Governor Gavin Newsom a few months ago. Had he not had security detail with him, who knows what would have happened? How many of us are able to walk around with security detail? Barbara Boxer just got mugged in Oakland. Her cell phone was taken. Under this administration, 20,000 convicted felons have been released during COVID. 20,000, many of them violent offenders. What could possibly go wrong? According to stats, the majority of them are likely to reoffend, and that's one of the reasons we have this rising crime problem. The other reason we have this rising crime problem is because cops are human beings. When you repeatedly accuse the police of engaging in systemic racism, what do? They pull back. You're going to accuse me of systemic racism? Much of police work, how many cops do we have here? Sir, thank you for your service. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Much of what you do is discretionary. You don't have to get out of the car if you don't want to. You don't have to wade into something that looks suspicious if you don't want to. What's the upside? You're going to be accused of systemic racism? The hell with it. So a lot of cops all over the country are engaging in what's called passive policing. No more proactive policing. It's called the Ferguson effect, or the George Floyd effect, now they call it that. Cops pulling back. What's the upside? And what happens? Crime goes up. And the very people who are disproportionately affected by the crime are the black and brown people that the left claims they care so much about. Defund the police? Are you killing me? Are you kidding me? Defund the police? I mentioned Barbara Boxer being mugged. Just days earlier, the Oakland PD chief talked about all the money being diverted from his department because of the defund the police movement. In LA, $150 million diverted for youth programs. Let me take a digression for a second. For youth programs. Why do we need youth programs? 2 reasons. The outrageous minimum wage has gone higher and higher, and those who are hurt the most are unskilled people. If you can't sell your labor for $10, $11, you'll have a job. So minimum wage hurts the very people that the left claims to care about, mostly people who are unskilled. There's another reason. The number one social problem facing this country is not climate change. It's not critical race theory. It's not reparations. The number one problem facing America is a growing number of children into the world without a father married to the mother. In 1965, a man named Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a booklet called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. At the time, 25% of black children entered the world without a father married to the mother. Obama once said, a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison. How have we gone from having 25% of black kids born outside of wedlock in 1965 to 70% today? 50% of Hispanic kids enter the world without a father married to the mother. 25% of white children enter the world today without a father married to the mother. Altogether, 40% of children in America enter the world without a father married to the mother. How has it happened? Well, a nouveau liberal named Lyndon Johnson launched the so-called War on Poverty in 1965. We've now spent almost $20 trillion fighting poverty, and poverty's winning. What we've done is we've incentivized women to marry the government, and we've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. The other reason for the rise in crime is because of Proposition 47 that I think Californians voted for with the best of intentions. A lot of people who steal are stealing to support their drug habit, their meth habit, their heroin habit. And the idea was that if you steal less than $950, it makes more sense for you to go into rehab than to go to jail. As a result, people are stealing $950 worth of stuff. They can do it every single day, at every single store. Worst that would happen to you, if you get a ticket, you're a misdemeanor. You can't force them to go to jail. And I talked to cops, I recently spoke with the sheriff of LA County, Alex Villanueva, and he said what they've done is they've taken away our stick. We can't tell people now who are doing this, either you dry out in jail or you dry out in rehab, but dry out you will do. Now they say, what are you going to do to me? Can't do anything to them. Outrageous. We have two soft on crime DAs, one in San Francisco and one in Los Angeles, both of whom are facing recall elections. Their elections. And they need to be recalled. Education. I went to Crenshaw High School. That's a high school. Anybody seen the movie Boys in the Hood? That's my high school. 2% of kids at Crenshaw High School are math proficient. That's not a typo. 2%. 80% of the public school children in California are black and brown. Again, the people that the left claims to care about. 75% black boys educated in our public schools in California cannot read at state levels of proficiency. 75%. And those levels are already low. Half of third graders cannot read at state levels of proficiency, again, and those levels are already low. 2/3 of black families, according to a recent report, say they do not want to send their kids back to Los Angeles Unified School District because they've been able to see through virtual learning the quality of education, and they see what they're getting. The worst teachers, the worst administrators, the worst principals end up in South Central. They don't put them in the West Side, they don't put them in the Valley, they put them in South Central, where they're going to do the most damage to kids that need the best teachers the most. It is outrageous. And yet, black and brown voters pull that lever year after year after year after year for the Democratic Party, whose largest funder is the California Teachers Union, and they hate school choice. Where a parent would have the opportunity to put their kid in a private school, or religious school, or a charter school, or a public school if they choose to. Let the money follow the child rather than the other way around. And that is going to be one of my big agenda items when I become governor. Already, the teachers union have given my opponent $1.8 million just a few days ago. And when it was clear that I was going to get into the race, the Service Employees Union gave him $5 million. It is estimated that already he's raised about $40 million to defeat me. When you take on the public sector unions, you're taking on King Kong. Remember Scott Walker, Wisconsin? Yeah. He took on the public sector unions, faced a recall election, he beat them, and he was able to get bargaining reduced just to wages, no more benefits, no more discipline. There are 300,000 public school teachers in California. Nationwide, I saw some study that estimated about 5% of all public school teachers were incompetent. I don't know what the percentage is here in California, but let's take that number, for example. 15,000 incompetent public school teachers, assuming that number holds. These are people going through our halls, in our classrooms, miseducating, undereducating, or not educating our kids. Assume, sir, that 5% of LAPD were bad cops. That would be 500 cops. Planting evidence, racial profiling, using excessive force. We wouldn't put up with it. We put up with 5% of public school teachers that are incompetent. Any given year, recent year, out of that universe of 300,000 public school teachers, an average of 2.2 have been fired. That's not acceptable. It takes almost an act of Congress to get rid of a bad public school teacher. What we can do is have more competition that will improve both public schools and it will improve private schools. More importantly, it will make sure that kids get a competent education so that when they graduate, they can read, write, and compute at grade level. Crime, homelessness, the outrageous cost of living, and the way he ignored science and denied kids an entire year of in-person education. One of the people on my campaign staff, and by the way, it doesn't take much to find these stories. Everybody's got one. Her brother was an Oakland public school football coach. Most of his players were black, he was white. Most of these players came from fatherless households. He was their father figure. He gave them structure. He begged the school system to keep it open. Come on, we're practicing outside. We can socially distance. We can make sure that we can do this safely. We're outdoors. They still shut it down. 2 of the kids got into trouble with the law. 1 committed a crime so serious, he's going to be away for years. It would not have happened had he had the daily contact with this man and had the same structure he had before. This is going to change when I get up there. Am I boring you? Young lady, am I boring you? I want to tell you a few things about me. My father came here in 1945, right after the war. I couldn't stand my father growing up. I have 2 brothers, they're both gone. We couldn't stand him. So I thought it was my father. I didn't think it was me, I thought it was my father. And I thought he was mean. I thought he was unfairly harsh. I thought he spanked us with his belt too often. By the way, I took the belt one time, threw it in the sewer. He bought another one. I thought he was angry for no reason, and what was most disturbing about my father is that he would get mad about something, and you would do that same something, and he wouldn't get mad. So you couldn't even figure out what the rules were. Well, so now I'm 10 years old, and the SOB starts a cafe. Now I gotta work for it. And he's yelling at me when I say cafe, I'm talking about a little diner. I mean, this is a little box, 15, 16 seats. The grill's right there, so everybody can see and hear everything going on. And so it's embarrassing when he's yelling at you. Now I'm 10 years old, 11, 12, 13, 14, now I'm 15. And I said to myself, I'm sick and tired of this SOB yelling at me. The next time he yells at me, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna walk out. That would have been an act of defiance that no one had ever done to my father before. And so he yelled at me, and I didn't have the nerve to walk out. So I waited a couple of weeks. Next time this guy yells at me, I'm going to walk out. He yelled at me, I didn't walk out. Next time he yelled at me, and finally I summoned the nerve to walk out. The waitress had called in sick that day. This was during rush hour, so the place was full of customers. I went in the back, took off my apron, and I walked out. That was an act of defiance that no one had ever done to my dad. He came home that night and he was furious. And I was laying on my bed, and my dad came to my bedroom and said, "Why did you leave?" And I said, "Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me, and I was not going to put up with it anymore." And my father paid me $10 a day plus tips. He balled up the $10. He threw it at me as I lay on my bed. He walked out of my bedroom, and my father and I did not have another conversation for 10 years. And when I say not another conversation, I mean not another conversation. Not even, think it might rain? How about those Dodgers? Hey, look at those Rams. Nothing. And he was easy to avoid because he worked long hours. I knew what the hours were, and I just avoided him. Not that we have a big house or anything, but I just avoided him. So now I graduate from high school, I go to college in New England, I go to law school in the Midwest, I end up working in Ohio, and I would come home, of course, to visit my mother, but I would just make sure my dad was never around when I was there. We did not speak to each other for 10 years. Now I'm 25 years old. I've just graduated from law school, I just passed the California bar, passed the Ohio bar. I should be living large. I'm working for a law firm that's now called Squire, Patton and Boss, one of the biggest law firms in America. And I'm making the equivalent of around $150,000, and I'm just 25 years old. I should be living large, but I can't sleep. And I knew it had to do with my dad. Not that I ever thought we'd be friends or anything, but I knew it was about my father. And so I called my secretary, and I said, cancel all my appointments. I'm flying to LA, I'll be back in a few days. And I did not tell my parents I was coming because I did not want my dad to prepare for this meeting. I figured it'd be 5-10 minutes, in the door, out the door. So I get to LAX, I take a cab right from LAX to the restaurant. He closed at 2:30, I knew that. I got there at 1:30. My dad was shocked to see me. I had my luggage, and he said, "Should I put your luggage in the back?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm only going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to tell you something." I was going to tell him what an SOB I thought he was. I figured he'd tell me I was an ungrateful son. Maybe I'd be able to sleep. So he said, "Wait till we close." And I sat there for an hour, and I said, "Now, Larry, calm down. Don't tell him everything he's ever done. Don't tell him every spanking he ever gave you. Don't tell him everything. Just cliff notes, a few highlights, 5 minutes. Call him an SOB. He'll probably call you an ungrateful son. Then you'll be able to sleep. So I waited for a whole hour, calmed myself down. My dad sat on the stool right next to me. And I teed off on him. I spoke for 20 minutes non-stop. You guys know how I can go. I told him everything he'd ever done. I told him the time he spanked me in front of my best friend Carl was embarrassing. The time he spanked me in front of my cousin Elaine, who was visiting from Cleveland, was embarrassing. Every whipping, every spanking, everything he'd ever said to me, everything he'd ever done to me, I told him, and I was spent. I was out of ammo after 20 minutes. And he looked up and he said, "Is that it? You didn't spank me for 10 years because of that?" And I said, "Yes." And for the first time, I saw my father cry. I did not think the man had the ability to cry. And he said, "Larry, let me tell you about my father." Now let me pause here. I knew nothing about my dad's life. I didn't give a damn. I didn't like him. I mean, I knew he didn't have any brothers and sisters because we never got any Christmas presents. And I knew I met his mom one time. That was it. I didn't know anything about his life. It never occurred to me to ask because I didn't care. I didn't like him. For the next 8 hours, the two of us sat on the stool, and my father told me about his life. He said, "Larry, you know your last name Elder?" I said, "Yes." He says, "That's not my father's name." I said, "What? Who's your father's name? Who's your father?" He said, "I have no idea, never met him." "You never met your father?" "No." "Who is Elder?" "Elder is the man who was in my life the longest, maybe about 4 or 5 years. He was an alcoholic. He rarely worked. And when he did, he brought the money home to my mom. She would hold it because he knew he would drink it away. Come Tuesday or Wednesday, he wanted it. She wouldn't give it to him. He'd beat the crap out of her. If I jumped in, he'd beat the crap out of me." "How long was he in your life?" 4 years. He said, "My mother," he said, "could neither read nor write." By the way, my dad's birthday is May 25, 1950. And my dad said she couldn't even write down his birthday. He knew the year. So when he enrolled in kindergarten, the teacher said, "What's your birthday?" He said, "I don't know." She wrote down May 25, which was her birthday. So I told my dad he had a 1 in 365 chance of it being right. My dad said, "I came home at the age of 13, and I started quarreling with my mom's then boyfriend. She sided with the boyfriend and threw me out of the house, never to return." Athens, Georgia, 13-year-old black boy, Jim Crow South at the beginning of the Great Depression. I defy very many of you to find somebody who got a hand dealt like that. And I said, "Well, Dad, what did you do?" The next 8 hours, he explained his life to me. I walked down the dirt road, knocked on the door, picked up trash, cleaned up the barn. I became a shoe shine boy, became a hotel valet. And then he got a job as a Pullman porter. They were the largest private employers of blacks in those days. And he was able to travel all around the country. This little black boy from Athens, Georgia was able to go all around the country. He came out to California one time on a run. And it was sunny, people seemed to be more friendly, and he could walk in the front door of a restaurant and get served, and that blew him away. Because he always had crackers with him and cans of tuna, because he said you never knew if you were going to be able to get a meal in the South. And he made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to Los Angeles. Pearl Harbor. My dad joined the Marines. I said, "Dad, why the Marines?" He said, 2 reasons. You know what I'm going to say? They go where the action is, and I love those uniforms. My dad was stationed on the island of Guam. He was in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. He was a staff sergeant. War's over, goes back to Chattanooga where he met and married my mom to get him a job as a cook. Walks around, 3, 4 restaurants, to his face, "We don't hire niggers." My dad goes to the unemployment office. Lady says, "You went to the wrong door." My dad goes out to the hall, sees color only, goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. She just wanted him to know what the rules were. My dad came home to my mom and said, "This is BS. I'm going to LA. They'll give me a job as a cook. I'll send for you." Comes out to LA, walks around. "I'm sorry, you don't have any references." "Where are your references?" "We need references." My dad said, "I need references to make ham and eggs?" Unemployment office, this time just one door. Lady says, "I have nothing." My dad said, "What time do you open?" She says, 9. "What time do you close?" She says, 5. My dad sat in the chair, for one day, 9 to 5. Next day, half day, she calls him up. I have something, I don't know whether or not you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it? She said, it's a job cleaning toilets at Nabisco brand bread. My dad did that for 10 years. Took a second job cleaning toilets at another bread company called Barbara Ann Bread for 10 years. Cooked for a family on the weekend. Went to night school 2 or 3 nights a week to get his GED. That's why the man was cranky. He wasn't sleeping. 15 minutes here, half hour here, maybe an hour here, maybe 2 hours here. If I don't get at least 4 or 5 hours, you don't want to be around me. The man never slept. That's why he was so cranky. You sleep like that and you walk into a household with 3 rambunctious boys, what kind of mood are you going to be in? So, as we're speaking, the man is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Larry is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now I'm crying. And I said, Dad, please forgive me. And my dad said, there's nothing to forgive, you just didn't know, but follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, he said, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you complain about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and say, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, he said this, no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. My father was a lifelong Republican. And my father always said this about Democrats. Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. I want to say quickly about how I got into talk radio, then I want to say a little something about my mother. She would not like me to leave her out. I got into talk radio because I began to write op-ed pieces for the newspaper when I was living in Cleveland. And when I said began to write, I would just write something and I would send it in. I would get a little card saying thank you, but we're not interested. This is the old days where you put something in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and send it. Some of you youngins don't know what I'm talking about. An envelope, stamp, really? And they would put it in the thing, and they would take 3 days. Yeah. And I wrote one time, and I got a little card saying, no, thank you, appreciate it, no, thank you, appreciate it. And I wrote another one that got published. And it was about 35 years ago or so. And in the article, I said that racism is no longer a major problem in America. If you invest in yourself, work hard, don't make bad moral mistakes. In America, you can be what you want to be. 35 years ago, I said this. So I get a phone call from the producer of a radio show. And he said, I read your article. You really don't believe racism is a major problem in America anymore? I said, no, it's not. It's a very different country than it used to be. He said, are you black? I said, I've been told. He said, would you come on my guy's radio show and talk about your article? I've never been on radio before. I didn't know anything about talk radio. I mean, I lived downtown, I worked downtown, so I didn't have the experience a lot of people have of being in the car listening to talk radio. I knew nothing about talk radio. So I agreed to come on. What, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, wouldn't be a problem. I was on for an hour. Now, Cleveland is 50% black, so almost all the callers were black. And I was called an Uncle Tom. I was called a bootlicking Uncle Tom. I was called a foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom. A bug-eyed foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom. A coconut, as I'm brown on the outside, white on the inside. Oreo, same concept. I was called the Antichrist, and then I was called the name you really call somebody black when you really want to hurt him. I was called Republican. So I get back to my office and the phone rings, and it's the station manager. He said, you were amazing today. I said, I was? Oh my goodness, you have a good speaking voice. you took difficult positions, you defended them without losing your temper or your sense of humor. Have you ever thought about doing talk radio? And I said, no. He said, I have a guy going on vacation. Would you sit in for him? I said, no. He said, why? I said, I don't like being yelled at, and I don't like yelling at other people. He said, are you married? And I was. And he said, do me a favor, go home to your wife and talk this over and call me back tomorrow. I said, I'll do that, but I'm not going to change my mind. So I went home to my then wife, Cindy, and I told her about this. And she said, well, what do you think? I said, I don't know anything about talk radio, other than it seems shallow, glib, and stupid. She said, it is. You'd be good at it. And then I met Dennis Prager, and the rest is history. That's how I ended up getting in talk radio. But I want to say something real quickly about my mother. My mother always told my brothers and me, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. Last story? Last story? Okay. I'm getting the hook over here. And when I was in high school, we read a poem by a man named County Cullen in a course on black literature. And it goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Teacher was furious. The class was furious. I was furious. Teacher talked about how this was always going to make him feel inferior. He's always going to have a stain as a second-class citizen. He'll never feel fully integrated into American society. And all of us were angry. So I'm walking home, and I said to myself, I wonder how Mom would react to this poem. I knew she would have a different reaction, didn't know what it would be. So I walk in the kitchen. She's stirring a big pot of greens and frying my favorite fried chicken wings. And I said, Mom, we read a poem in class by a guy named County Cullen. I want to get your reaction to it. She said, go ahead. I said, it goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he put out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all things that happened there, that's all that I remember. She took the spoon out of the pot, hit it on the side, and said, Larry, what a damn shame he let something like that spoil his vacation. How many wings do you want? Thank you so much for having me. May God bless you.